Talking Joe podcast, minds in motion. Talk about relationships, help your emotions. Behavior management when your kids start to losing it. Talk about life and all the confusion. Minds in motion. Minds in motion. Talk about relationships. I'm talking Joe podcast, minds in motion. Talk about relationships, help your emotions. Behavior management when your kids start to losing it. Talk about life and all the confusion. Minds in motion. Minds in motion. Talk about relationships. Emotion. Minds in motion. Talk about relationships.
And welcome to Minds in Motion with me, your host, Jewel. This evening, I don't have a guest, but I'm going to be talking about a very important topic, as usual. But I want to say thank you in advance to all of the viewers that are tuning in tonight on all of the platforms. I'm just going to shout everybody out right now on Facebook, TDN TV, YouTube, TDN TV Network 1, and Twitch. We're on Twitch. Yes, that's new. I actually have to go back and check out the episodes and see what that looks like on Twitch. We're also on Instagram Live. Thank you so much for tuning in there. And we're on GTM Radio. And we're also on SBE Radio, and that is streaming in live in Toronto. So I have a viewing audience and a listening audience. Thank you for tuning in. Tonight, the topic is why go to counseling? Why go to counseling? So before we get into all of the meat and all of the tea of why you and your family should consider going to counseling if you're going through certain issues, I want to just talk about why I decided to do Minds in Motion, what brought me to doing this podcast. As the song was singing, Minds in Motion, talk about relationships and all of the confusion that comes with being in relationships. So whether you're in a relationship with a spouse, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, your friendships, mother-daughter, parent-child, a father-daughter, any kind of relationship, those are things that we're going to be talking about on Minds in Motion. I really decided to gear these conversations towards African and Caribbean diasporic people because I find, just being of the diaspora, I find that people tend to shy away from topics like the ones that I cover on the show. So if you, so I'm just seeing this, the YouTube, the text message that's going across there. You can text my number if you want to send in a text message. The number is 1647. So I'm in Toronto. So the number is 1647-495-3224. I have my phone right here beside me if you would like to send a text message. So getting back to the conversation as to why I started this podcast, I thought it was very important to just highlight topics that are pertaining to Black folk, Black people. Whether you're from the Caribbean, whether you're from Africa, or Brazil, or wherever you are from, but once you have melanated skin tone like mine, it's really for you, right? Just based on working in a field of social work and social services, I tend to come across a lot of families that shy away from getting support, getting services, and being labeled, their children being labeled. A few episodes back, I talked about ADHD and ADD. I also talked about autism, the ASD or autism spectrum. And a lot of times when our kids are in school, they tend to, they need to be meeting certain milestones, right? And if they're not meeting these milestones in school, they tend to fall behind, right? Um, so things like reading. Let's start with talking, just talking, learning to talk from an early age. I'm thinking maybe around 2, 3, when kids are starting to say words, mama, dada, and eventually we're increasing the vocabulary by just speaking to them. I think it's important to just speak to children, even though they're not speaking back to you, that it's important to speak to them so they can increase their vocabulary. I went across on my favorite app, which I'm not on yet. I'm not streaming live on yet. But on that app, I came across a young man who has autism. He's autistic. He and his mom, they were just having conversations, just showing his daily life. And the mom said, you know what? He didn't start speaking until I think he was 6. He didn't start speaking until he was about 6 years old. And the mother just kept speaking to him, kept speaking to him. And she said, you know what? Don't give up. If the child doesn't have any speech, just keep speaking to that child. And the child may develop that language, speech and language. Just keep faithful and hope, right? Sometimes it doesn't always happen that way, that the speech comes, but more times than not, speech will come for that child if you continue to speak, and not in baby language either, like to speak normal, to speak how you would speak to anyone else and any child that is quote unquote normal, to speak to that child, right? So that's one reason. So autism is one reason that I wanted to do this podcast. The other reason is ADHD and ADD. So we covered those things already, but throughout all of the themes, you're probably going to hear about mental health. It's very important that I talk about mental health, and that in our diaspora that we talk about mental health and we acknowledge it, and we realize that it is a real thing. It's a real thing. People do suffer with depression and anxiety and schizophrenia and bipolar, all of those and more. That we have these things in our population as well, and we are not to ignore them. We're not to call people crazy. I know in our population in the Caribbean, we call people crazy or dotish or foolish, right? We just want to label them with our own labels rather than getting that person medically diagnosed with proper diagnosis. The best time to do that is when it's early, in the stages of early recognition of that disorder or disability, right? If some of you were on the show a few weeks back, I had someone named Pookie from the UK. She goes by Pookie. She said she went into the doctor herself at the age of early 20s to get diagnosed, right? She went there and she asked the doctor if she thought something was different. She knew that she was definitely different. Doesn't mean that she is less than, it's just she knew that she was different. She learned differently. She interpreted information and took things in differently. So going to the doctor, she found out for sure she has autism. So she's autistic. And that just helps. I'm sure it was a relief for her. And she knew then where she could navigate some more supports, right? And in you finding out where your child is or where your child lands, it's going to help you to navigate yourself throughout the systems that are in place for you. For example, the school is there for you. You just have to know how to use the school board to your advantage, right? and to know how to use them to your advantage and how to utilize the tools that they provide for you. So, um, let's get into the topic at hand for tonight. Again, if you feel comfortable enough to send in a message or a comment, feel free to do that. You can text the number 1-647-495-3224, or you can send in a message on any of the platforms that you're watching right now: Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Instagram. So I just want to get right into the topic. Why go to counseling? Why go to counseling? I know that in my household, growing up, it was always told to me, whatever happens in the house stays in the house, right? So if there was something happening, um, we weren't allowed to go talk about it outside. We weren't allowed to um, express what was happening inside the home. No matter how bad it got, we weren't allowed to do that. And not really understanding why we couldn't do that. As I got older, I understood more. It was more of a matter of um, one, keeping our business to ourselves. Two, maybe my parents felt that it was something that they could handle on their own and they didn't need people to know about. The other big thing could have been to avoid, like, social services getting involved, because, when a child goes to school and says XYZ happened, the first thing that the educator is going to see or ask is, is this a disclosure? Should I be going to Children's Aid or Child Protective Services to find out if this is a matter of a child being neglected or abused or physically abused or whatever the case may be? I think they were trying to avoid that. And I think a lot of parents that I work with try to avoid Children's Aid. The ultimate, oh my gosh, they're going to take my kids, right? In Canada, and I'm pretty sure around the world now, in Canada, they're more focused on keeping families together and giving families strategies of how to best manage what's happening in the home, right? So I'll give you some examples of reasons why you might want to consider taking your child to counseling or going to counseling yourself. Okay, I'm first going to focus on children because that's my specialty and that's my area of expertise, and my passion is working with kids. I'm an advocate. So if you're seeing your child being withdrawn from friends or activities that they would normally be doing, that's a sign that something could be going on with them. And I would hope that you would create a space for that child to come to you and openly discuss things that happen with them. A parent that is more opened and welcomed to discussions is going to have a child that is going to open up and talk to them about virtually everything, right? Literally everything, or almost everything, right? It really depends on the age of the child and what the situation is. But you want to encourage your child to speak to you and be comfortable enough to talk to you about things that are happening with them, right? Let's go back to the list. If there's persistent sadness or fear with your child or children, that is something to consider when maybe thinking about going to counseling, right? Why is that child presenting as being sad or expressing fear? Especially for the educators that are watching or caregivers that are watching. Like, why is the child that you're working with coming in expressing sadness and fear? Or you might see there's a drastic change in the child the sleep patterns and eating patterns. Those things are indicators as well that something could be going on. And we, as parents and caregivers, have to investigate and dig deeper to find out what is going on with that child. We're not just going to simply say, get up, get out, open the blinds, what's wrong with you? We don't want to talk to kids like that. We want to make sure that their voices are heard and that we speak to them in a manner that's respectful as well. Not because we're the adults in their lives doesn't give us room to speak to them in that manner, right? I know sometimes people think, I'm the adult, you're the child, you need to do as I say. No, it's not, it doesn't work that way. A child that is spoken to in that manner more than likely will go more into a shell and revert back more into themselves and not talk to you about things at all. They won't want to share with you if you're coming at them in a hostile way. Okay. If you're having difficulty managing, if the child is having difficulty managing daily routines and or schoolwork, that might also be an indicator that something's happening with them in their lives, right? You want to ask. Just, I would say to be very straightforward and frank when you're asking the question. Is there something happening at school that we need to talk about or that you'd like to talk about? And, just wait for the answer. They may tell you no at first. And then you might want to say, if you don't want to talk about it, maybe you can write it down. If they're old enough to write it down, then let them write it down and share that with you if they're not comfortable talking to you. But if you see it's persistent over time, right? So again, I'm going to list those things out. Withdrawal from friends and activities, persistent sadness and fear, drastic changes in sleep patterns and eating habits, and also difficulty managing daily routines and schoolwork. If you see these signs, these could be signs for your child that you're working with or the child that you have in your care, whether you're the parent or the caregiver. Something could be happening with that child and you want to investigate, find out. And not just like a one-time thing. You're not going to say, okay, my child needs to go to counseling because this is happening once. I'm talking it's persistent. It's happening often. It's becoming a problem. They can't get up for school on time. They're not doing their schoolwork all of a sudden. They don't have the energy to do it anymore. Or they've found a different activity to replace their schoolwork, and that activity might be hanging out with friends that you know, or friends that you don't even know, right? Let's address that for a minute. Friends that you don't know of can be a problem. So going back to my first episode on Minds in Motion, when I had Shayna McCullough on talking about Ontario Muslim boys and Ontario Black boys at that, they are missing. And those particular boys have gone missing because they found out, there's a lifestyle that can pay them some money. They think that can pay them some money and that they're interested in doing. They're interested in trapping, which is something that we talked about. Trapping and selling drugs and going OT out of town. So be aware of things that your kids are talking about. Sometimes they're using slang words or terminologies that we may not know, right? And me, just because I am working in the school system, I tend to try to be on the up and up about what the terminologies and slang terms are nowadays with the kids. Because one thing, if they say one thing, it might mean one thing to us, but it may mean another thing to that young person, right? When I first heard OT, I said overtime at work. That's what OT means to me. But OT now means out of town. Out of town means that the child is going out of town to do something that is not necessarily a good thing. So be aware of what they're saying, who they're hanging out with. I would encourage you to take the phone numbers and even addresses of the kids that your children are hanging out with. Be aware of who they're hanging out with, what the name of these children are, and not just their street names. Like if you hear their name as, for example, Pookie or Tall Man or Snoopy or whatever the name is, you want to find out what their government name is, right? Find out what their government name is, get that phone number, connect with that parent as well, right? You want to be, the child might think you're overdoing it. Your children might think you're overdoing it. Oh, mom, why do you have to know who, or dad, why do you have to know who I'm going to? This is embarrassing. You need to come to the house? Yes. Yeah, absolutely you do. Absolutely. I need to go and see who that child's parents are, see them face to face, see how they live, because there's scary things happening in the streets today. Okay? So that is like withdrawal. If your kids now are not involved in the things that they used to be involved in, and now they've turned to do different things, or they've chosen to have a different set of friends that you don't know necessarily, right? Or maybe they're older friends, or maybe they're all friends from one particular side of town. You need to know that, okay? And in terms of persistent sadness or fears, what does that look like? What does sadness look like? To you and me, sadness might be one thing, but to your child, sadness might be something else. And what we think may not be such a big thing, to your child, it probably is a big thing, right? So I'll give you an example. So I was working with some young people. Their age group is, let's say, 13. They're 13. And one day I saw one of the students, and I said to her, "Hey, why do you look so sad? What's going on with you?" And she's normally like, when she sees me, she'll be, "Hey, miss, how are you?" And she'll come up to me. And even though she's not like the huggy type, because I have a lot of students that just want to come and just hug me, or just be up in my face. But she usually comes up to me and says, "Hi, miss, how are you?" This time she kind of was like moping around, sad face. And I asked her, what's going on? And she just shook her head and kind of looked down. And I said, "What's going on with you? This is not normally how you behave." She said, "Nothing." And that nothing means something. She's asking you to pry, or he or she or they are asking you to pry and find out more information about what is going on with them. And it's up to you how you deal with it, because you can turn around and say, whatever. If you don't want to talk, fine, keep it to yourself. But on the other hand, you could also say, I know that there is something bothering you. When you have a moment, when you feel like you want to come talk about it, come talk to me. Give them their time and their space to talk about it. But sometimes you might want to say, "Can you leave what you're doing, your activity that you're doing? Come have a seat. Let's talk about it." Right? You almost sometimes have to force them to talk about it, because teenagers will not, most likely not readily, they won't readily come to you with their problems or things that are going on. So anyways, I got the girl to come to me. Long-winded story, but I got her to come to me and talk about what was going on with her. And in her situation, it was that a friend of hers, who was her bestie, her really, really good friend, basically told her at the beginning of the year, which is the new year, that same New Year's Eve or New Year's Old Year's night, she said, "I need a break." Her friend told her she needs a break from her friendship. And she was devastated. And she stopped eating. She wasn't doing the activities that she was doing anymore. And her mom noticed that as well. And so I had to talk her through it and talk about it. And then finally invite the other student to discuss and let her know how she's feeling as well. Right? So they both ended up talking together. Um, they both ended up talking together, and they resolved the problem. And I shouldn't say they resolved it. They came up with a solution, and the solution was that they went their separate ways. The one who was sad had to really come to terms with the other person has outgrown her or has chosen to move on. But I think it was good for them to just even come and just sit and talk about it, because um, she needed to hear that from the other person, right? She needed to know what was going on. So even though your kids are sad, don't dismiss it. Don't ever think that it's just, oh, they're kids. What could they really have a big problem about? You're not working. You're not putting bread and butter on the table. You don't have to worry about a roof or clothes on your back. I do all that stuff as the adult. What are you worried about? They have legit problems, and these things are big to them, right? What's big to them may not be big to us, but we need to acknowledge that they're going through something, right? So there's a comment in the back. I don't know if someone came up with the idea of keeping everything private. Caribbean people are of the notion that their business is their business and no one else should know, even when it's hurting them. Absolutely. I know. I don't know why and who came up with this. It's dangerous, and we've seen the issues that come out of teaching children to be secretive. Yes, absolutely. Last week we had so we're going to come back to what the reasons for counseling, but this is us. We sometimes as a people have driven our children into silence and secrecy, and eventually into mental health issues, because we keep saying you can't talk about these things. They're going on with you. Last week we had Tanya King on, and she was talking about the signs of sexual grooming. And we tell our kids, you can't talk about these things. Don't talk about sex and don't talk about these things to anyone. Even if it's happening in the home, you keep it in the home. And if she didn't keep that, if she didn't tell anyone and kept that to herself, she probably would have had a mental breakdown. She probably would have had a mental breakdown, or she probably would have become a predator herself, right? So she ended up getting counseling, as she said. But we need to allow our children to talk about things. And even us as adults, we need to learn to talk about things and talk through things that we're going through, right? So I'm just going to highlight some things, very specific titles for things that our children and our youth are experiencing. So mental health. So they may be having struggles with anxiety and depression. Okay. Mood disorders and self-harm. Not yesterday, a couple of days ago, I had a student who was having an anxiety attack, and she identified it as an anxiety attack, and she knew that it was that. Very young girl, age 11, and something had happened, and she was sobbing like hysterically, like she couldn't stop sobbing and like hyperventilating. I made the sound, but that is what it sounds like when you're hyperventilating. And she had anxiety, and can identify it as, I had an anxiety attack. This happens to me. So sometimes people are aware of when they're having these moods, right? It's mental health. Anxiety is mental health. We may not think that, right? So mood disorders and self-harm. Self-harm is serious. I'm going to have a social worker on here in a few weeks. Well, probably lower down into the spring to talk about different things, but I'll also have her talk about self-harm. Self-harm is when a child is cutting themselves to feel pain because they are trying to they're trying to give an answer or get answers for things that they don't understand, right? And if you know someone that's self-harming, you need to try and seek counseling for them, right? Behavioral challenges is something that I I have a lot of experience in, and that's another reason why a child would seek counseling, or you would seek counseling as an adult in their life for that child. So myself being a child and youth practitioner, that child might come to me to get some strategies on how to manage aggression, defiance, or a sudden change in behavior, right? Sudden change in behavior can be impulsivity, where they are not in control of that. And there's reasons for behaviors. Every behavior is trying to tell you something, trying to give you a message of why they're doing this, right? So we need to look at the behavior and see it not just for the behavior, but why is this behavior happening, right? Question, why is the behavior happening? And also to separate the behavior from the child. Separate the behavior from the child. What does that mean? It simply means that you're not going to say that child's bad. I don't like that word bad, to say the child is bad. They've probably made a poor choice, or if you want to say a bad choice, but I prefer poor choice than bad choice. They made a poor choice in doing what they did, and you're not going to penalize them, right? Because something happened to make them behave that way. It could have been a learned behavior, something they learned. So, for example, a learned behavior could be talking back. So parents sometimes get into this power struggle with their children where they're talking to their child, they're directing their child to do something, and the child speaks back to them. And instead of you saying, don't speak to me that way, that's disrespectful and rude, the child then responds to you, and then you're going back and forth with that child. And that is something that you should never do, never engage in back and forth with your child, because that is not having a discussion. That is not solving a problem. It is adding fuel to the fire, and the child is engaging in a disrespectful behavior, and you're challenging your child, whereas your child needs to learn some management skills of how to manage themselves more appropriately, right? If you are out there in the streets or with your friends, arguing with your friends, or you're cursing or you're swearing, I shouldn't say cursing, it's cussing. Right? Cursing is different from cussing. So cussing with your friends, using profanities, and then your child now comes to school and uses those same profanities. There's not much room for you to redirect, because they saw you, they learned it from you, right? So you can't say, it's really hard for you to say, do as I do, do as I say, not do as I do, right? You want them to follow a direction, but you don't want them to follow you in what you're doing. It's kind of hard, right? You're their first role model. They're learning from you. So you're also their first teacher, okay? Some other reasons that you might want to consider counseling for your child is trauma and loss. They might have experienced abuse or grief or significant life changes. So abuse, them being abused, or they witnessing someone being abused, can be traumatic for that child, right? Even if it wasn't them being abused, they witnessed it and it affects them. So that's trauma, right? And part of our role, my role, working with children, is to work from a trauma-informed lens. Because a lot of us are walking around with unresolved trauma, things that we experienced from a little child that we saw or heard, and we weren't allowed to talk about it. We weren't allowed to go to counseling about it. So then we walk around with this trauma and we can't talk to anyone. So now, as an older person, the best thing to do is to get counseling, to talk about it, to release it, right? Sometimes we put it at the back of our heads, but it's still there. It's still in our memory bank. It's still something that traumatizes us, right? And how do we know it's traumatizing us? Because if something happens um, that is similar to what we experience, we're triggered by it. That's what a trigger is. So then we go, oh my gosh, the light turns on, and we remember and almost replay those situations that we experienced when we were younger or not so much younger, right? And loss. So if there's a loss of a parent, loss of a grandparent, especially if it was tragic, right, through an accident or a murder, those things kids need to go to counseling about, right? If somebody dies in their life, they need to get some counseling. Whether the counseling is a short-term counseling or long-term counseling, I think there's room for that counseling to happen, right? Or significant life changes, like maybe the child grew up in a particular neighborhood for the majority of their lives. And then you decided as a parent, as an adult, you know what? Um, my life needs to change. So I'm going to get a new job and I'm going to move out of the city because it's probably easier to buy a house or to pay the bills outside of the city or closer to my job. So I'm moving and not really considering the child's feelings, how they feel about the move. You do it because you're thinking this is the best thing for them. And it may be in the long run, but that child may be still suffering with loss of a friend, loss of teachers that she was close to, relationships that she built or he built, right? So that's another reason for counseling. Family transition. So um, another type of transition could be like coping with divorce or separation or dealing with a blended family, right? So when we decide as adults that we're going to get divorced, if we have children, some of us talk to our kids about it, but some of us just we're going through it on our own. We're trying to cope with this as adults, like our own lives. How are we going to survive divorce? We're going through it as adults. It's our problem. Yes, it's your problem, but the kids are involved. How are the kids impacted? They're impacted. They're seeing what's going on, and oftentimes they can hear arguments and they hear things that are not so good about the other parent or the other parent saying things. And if they're visiting different homes, right, that can be really hard for a child to hear and to deal with. So we need to limit or no, say nothing at all about the other person, right? So those kids are experiencing trauma and also experiencing family transition and dealing with it. They're not the ones being divorced, but they're going through the divorce. And sometimes they blame themselves for the divorce happening. So if they were experiencing behavioral challenges, like what I mentioned earlier, they might say, you know what, my parents are getting divorced because of my behavior, because of me, right? And they may not necessarily be the issue. And more times than not, they're not the issue, right? And blended families. What's a blended family? A blended family is when couple decides to get together, they have their own children, right? And then they live in the same house with their children from previous relationships. And that could be very traumatic for a child who's always had their own room or maybe never had to share anything with anyone. And they have a sibling, a sibling, and they have to now figure out how am I going to fit into this family or how are things going to look, right? Those things can cause stress for children. So we need to talk to kids. I mean, they're pretty reasonable young people. I think kids understand more than we think they do. So having that discussion, and if it's affecting them, that's another reason to go to counseling, right? I have a couple more reasons why you should consider counseling for your children. And then again, the floor is open for conversations. So if you're watching and you want to say something, you want to ask a question, go ahead and ask that question. And also the line is open for text messages. So it's 647-495. I'm just looking for the number 495-3224. All right. So I'm just going to touch on two more reasons that your child or might want to go to counseling, or that you might want to send your child to counseling for, are for academic and peer stresses. What does that mean? Academic and peer stresses. It simply means dealing with the stresses of school. And maybe there's a bully at school, right? Maybe there's a bully at school and it's preventing your child from going to school. They don't want to go to school because they don't want to be bullied. They don't want someone to take their food. They don't want someone to extort them for money. Sometimes you're giving them their lunch money and someone's taking it from them because they know that your child is coming to school with lunch money. Or maybe they're stealing their food, right? And that can be a contributor to them not eating as well, right? So we're going to look out for those signs. Why are kids not eating? Sorry, there was a request for me to speak a little bit louder. Maybe I'm not speaking loud enough. Let me bring my mic a little bit closer. So going back to the academic and peer stresses, dealing with school. So the child could be bullied, right? Could be being bullied outside of school or in school, and we don't know about it, right? There could be pressures and difficulties making friends. Believe it or not, that can be an issue. So whether you think your child is the most beautiful child in the world and they have the greatest personality, making friends might be difficult for them, right? We live in a world where kids can be very mean to each other. They can be very mean, right? Especially if we're in a mixed culture school. It could be a race thing as well. Some kids are maybe being excluded because they're not of the same race. They don't speak the same language. Maybe they're not into the same kind of music that your child listens to. Or maybe your child's a Christian and they're having or a Muslim and they're having a difficult time integrating with other populations. All these things can be issues. All of these things can be issues and cause problems for your child and then build up over time, right? They may not come to you, but it can build up over time. And you may not know the words to say to your child. So getting them to a counselor like myself, I'll get there in a few minutes, but getting them to a counselor would help to talk through things and to figure out and to dig deeper, more than what's just on the surface, because more times than not, there's more things happening below the surface that you can't see. Okay? Another reason for sending your child to counseling or taking your child to counseling is skill building. Skill building. And what does that mean? It means helping your child to develop emotional regulation, coping strategies, and improve communication. So the child that you have may be quiet at school. Maybe at home, they're rambunctious, they can talk to people, no problem. But when they get at school, there's all different types of people, like I just described, different races, different cultures, different interests. And when they get to school, they're quiet because they may think that they don't fit in for whatever reason. They're not talking up in class, they're not participating, and or it could be the total different end of the spectrum, where your child is not regulating themselves. Like when something happens, they have an explosion. They're yelling and they're expressing themselves in an unhealthy manner, and you need them to calm and to reflect on what role they had to play in whatever situation it is, right? So that's another reason to seek counseling. Okay. So I'm just going to list what I just went through and not giving the definitions of each word. Reasons for counseling: mental health, 1; behavioral challenges, 2; 3; trauma and loss, 4; family transitions, 5; academic and peer stresses, 6; skill building. Okay. So I listed off some reasons for counseling and signs to look out for that could alert you to the fact that a child needs counseling. Now let's talk about what I can do as a counselor. I can talk to your child about those skill building. I can talk to them about the bullying. I can talk to them about strategies, right? We come up with a plan of action of how to deal with the matter. So it may be if something's happening at school where the child is being bullied, right? That's academic stress. I can be an advocate for you or give you a game plan of how to approach the school and what to say to the school to find out what's happening at school and why is this issue not being addressed. I found that in the news lately, a lot has been happening in schools where children are being bullied or not being treated appropriately, and they're not the matter's not being handled appropriately either. I can help you to learn to advocate. I can teach you ways to advocate for your child, right? So if you want to come to a session with your child, maybe I'll have sessions with your child and then sessions with you and your child. And just give you both strategies of how to cope with the school system. The school system can also be a bully as well, right? It really depends. Teachers can bully kids as well. It happens, and we need to take it seriously as well, right? So listen to your kids. When they come home and they tell you things, investigate, find out what's happening at the school, right? What was said. You want to get there and have actually, before you even get there, I don't want you to go in there and rage and be upset. I want you to make a formal meeting so it's documented that you met with the principal and the vice principal and the teacher to find out what's going on. Okay? When you go to the school, make sure you have a notebook and a pen and you are writing notes. You want to document who you spoke to, the day you went there, who said what, if you need to. Oh, just a minute. I just need to write down what your name is, and I'm just making a note, right? Let them know that you're not playing about your children. You're not playing about your child, okay? And I can help you to find out who the school trustee is and all of that stuff if you feel that you need support in that, right? Let's get back to talking about your kids getting the counseling. So now your child is going through things. They need to talk about it. They need to get it out. And I'm going to teach them strategies of how to navigate students that they are working with, or students that they have in their classroom, I should say. Okay? Their peers that are bullying them, their peers that are harming them. If your child has a behavioral challenge, I will give strategies to your child of how to manage themselves. There's always reasons for behavior, as I said. Okay? You can reach me on an email address. I don't have it coming across the screen, but if you go to my Instagram page, which is Minds in Motion Wellness, you can find me on Instagram. You can find me on TikTok. I'm going to be posting information about how to get in contact with me to get counseling for your child or your youth, your older youth. So I'm going to say youth is going up to even 25, right? Young people. And I do counseling as well for adults. Okay. Um, on the Instagram page, I'm going to be posting videos and clips from these shows. If it's not for you and it's for someone else, you can direct them to my page. I'm going to be offering online counseling and in person counseling. We would book an appointment. I would do an assessment just to find out a little more information about your child and yourself, or if it's just for yourself, just to do an assessment to find out more about you. And then we would start our counseling sessions. Okay. So I'm an easygoing person. I I'm a very straightforward person. I give information um, for free for 20 minutes, but after that, it's going to be a paid counseling session. So I'm offering 20 minutes for consultation if you want to call me and we can talk about the things that you are experiencing with your child or that you're experiencing for yourself. You could text that number 647 495 3224, or you can call me as well and we can talk about setting up a meeting to do a consultation, right? I know these are very sensitive topics, and I really appreciate everyone for just tuning in and just listening to what I have to say about counseling. I know something that our people don't do. I'm not saying everyone doesn't do it, but a lot of people shy away from counseling. They shy away from therapy, and I don't want to call it therapy because of that reason. So, but it is really therapy, right? I call it therapeutic counseling. So you're getting a therapeutic counseling, a therapeutic way of seeing things through someone else's eyes, your own life through my view or the counselor's view, and giving you strategies, real strategies, okay, for you to live life on a lighter side, not stressful side, okay? So consider it for yourself, consider it for your children, your grandchildren, your nieces, your nephews, um, or your students, right? If you have kids that are going through things and you know that you see differences in them, you see something that is not socially acceptable, or that they're going through a period of depression, they're hiding away in their room, they're going through mood swings or mood disorders, they might want to talk to someone. Okay. And as you can see, I can talk a lot. I can talk a lot. And I think what I would do is give your child a plan and also give you a plan of how to go forward with what the next steps are, right? And even if it was about getting a diagnosis for your child, getting a diagnosis isn't necessarily a bad thing either, because having a diagnosis will allow you and your child to have the best services ever, right? And it will allow you also to register your child with the government as having a disability. And having that disability will also gain funding for you to take your child to counseling, right? So think about those things. In the next episode, I'm going to talk about more strategies and also offer some information. So on my Instagram page, if you go there, I'm also going to be posting different services that you can go to register to get funding to support your kids. Okay. I'm not sure where everyone is watching from, but if you're watching from Ontario, Canada, there are some support services through our government, but you have to register at an early age. Registering now, you can get it, but there might be a wait list. The best thing to do is when you find out your child has a diagnosis. I know sometimes it's hard to admit that there's something different about your child, but getting a pediatric assessment to find out what's going on, to rule things out, is the best thing to do. Also, getting that assessment will get you the best services, and also eventually get you to get some money for services. All right. So thank you, Jewel. I will pass this on. All right. You're welcome. You're welcome. I wish you do pass this information on. I know sometimes it can be quite daunting and quite hard. And as I spoke, I said, within our community, it's hard. We don't want to talk about these things. We don't want to talk about counseling. We don't want to talk about therapy because we think we can handle it all. We think we have it. We think we know all the answers, but we don't. And nor do I. But I can help to navigate you to resources. When I say resources, I'm talking about financial resources, other resources that are going to support your children to get have a better future, whether it's academically or socially. Maybe it's an academic program, like tutoring, or a recreational program that can have your child express themselves in a different way. So, again, I want to say thank you for tuning in from Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch. It's a GTM Radio, SB. Let me look for that name. I don't want to butcher it. SBE Radio. Thank you for tuning in to Minds in Motion with me, your host, Jewel, where you get real talk, real strategies, and real situations. Don't be afraid to send me a DM on my Instagram, and also follow me on my YouTube channel, which is Minds in Motion Wellness, and also follow all of the platforms that you're watching from right now, which are Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Have a wonderful night. Don't forget to stay on, because right after this is Anthony Drago's show. Anthony Drago does a show called This Week in Interview, and he's going to be interviewing someone tonight. And the only way for you to find out is for you to tune in. Okay? So make sure you stay on this channel. Right after this is going to be Anthony Drago's show. And that's happening at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you're in the Caribbean, it's 7 o'clock, but it's the same time. Stay on this channel. Have a blessed evening, everyone. Take care. I am your host, Jewel, and you were watching Minds in Motion. Take care.